And when they depart for the sake of Allah. And then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in this venerable hadith, he said, وَرَجُلٌ دَعَتْهُ امْرَأَةٌ ذَاتُ مَنْصِبًا وَجَمَالٍ. That this man, he is approached by a beautiful woman who has a high status, social status. She has a high social status, and she tempts him to do that which is illicit. And he says, Inni akhafullah. He says, certainly I fear Allah Ta'ala. So out of his fear of Allah Ta'ala, he does not allow himself to be tempted by this woman. And then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, وَرَجُلٌ تَصَدَّقَ بِصَدَقَةٍ فأخفاها حتى لا تعلم شماله وما تنفق يمينه. Which means that this man, he gives the charity, or woman, but this person gives the charity in a discreet manner, in a hidden manner, in such a way it's as if his left hand does not know what his right hand is doing. Meaning this is a figure of speech, but it means that he does it in a discreet manner. And then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he mentioned the last of these people. He said, وَرَجُلٌ ذَكَرَ اللَّهَ خَالِيًا فَفَاضَتْ عَيْنَاهُ. That this man, he remembers Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he does so in private, and his eyes begin to flow, that he starts to cry out of the remembrance and out of the love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in this hadith, the Prophet mentioned 7. Meaning, and these are not the only 7, but these are among those. When we talked about this day, the Yawm that is 50,000 years in duration, and we talked about the tremendous tribulations of this day, and that the masses and masses and masses and masses of humanity will be in a state of utter terror, and they will be, many of them, in a state of being humiliated and degraded by the malaika, by the angels of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Prophet told us that there will be 7 that will be safe, and there are others that will be safe, but we're talking about in general. He mentioned specifically these 7 people. But I want to go back and mention one point about the Aqidah, and then we mention the 7 inshaAllah. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he mentioned that one of his characteristics is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would be able to give him depth and breadth of meaning in his speech with few words. And one of the matters is very important for us when I mentioned about the dhil, that this, if you say the shadow, the shade or the shadow. Some people, the dhil of Allah, like when we say Baytullah or Buyutullah, the houses of Allah or the house of Allah, meaning the masajid, that when we say that this is the house of Allah, we do not mean that it is the dwelling of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, obviously. Does not mean the dwelling where Allah ta'ala dwells, because Allah ta'ala huwa mawjudun bila makan, that Allah exists without place. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not a jism. Huwa laysa jisma. He's not an object, not a spatial entity. He is not something that takes up size or dimensions. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not resemble or need any of the creations in any way whatsoever. This is the core of our aqidah. But in this hadith, when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentions the dhil is and it's mentioned in another hadith of the Prophet, and he explicitly mentions that this dhil, that this shadow, is the shade of the arsh. That the arsh, those people who will be safe, who will be in the security of the shadow of the arsh, this is the shadow which is honored by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that these honorable people that we mentioned among these 7, they are in this shadow. Be careful, because there are people, mushabbiha, mujassima, people who believe in one way or another that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is somehow, in one regard or another, similar to the creations. They believe that Allah ta'ala is a body, wa'yadu billah, and they believe He cast a shadow on the day of judgment. And they go further with their hideous kufr, what they attribute to Allah. They say Allah Ta'ala has a shin and He cannot be identified until He shows His shin on the day of judgment. This belief is taught in this city, brothers and sisters. And I don't want to digress too much on this point, but I have to say this. You need to understand that there are people in this city in